Hi everybody, welcome to Conflict, Mediation, and You. Today we want to talk about the relationship between addiction and mediation and even conflict. You might not think those three would go together, especially mediation and addiction, but stick around. I think you'll be surprised. Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Rick.
And I'm Robert, and we're back with you again.
We want to introduce to you Jim Seckman. He's the CEO of MARR, Metro Atlanta Recovery Residence. He's running an addiction program, and we wanted to ask him several questions about conflict and mediation and the ways in which we need to understand how addiction can affect conflict and mediation. Jim, say more about MARR.
MARR, as you said, Metro Atlanta Recovery Residences, is a long-term residential treatment program for addicted men and women. That's kind of the thumbnail sketch.
Mm-hmm.
It started in 1975, so we just celebrated our 40th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. We've been around that long. And we have actually four main programs. We have a men's program, and it's all adult men. We're not able to treat adolescents, but we have an adult men's program in the Doraville area. We have an adult women's program up in Lawrenceville. We are gender separate, gender specific. Co-ed treatment doesn't always work real well.
Okay.
We also have a men's sober living program called Traditions, and we have a women and children's program for needy women where they can bring their child with them into treatment.
Wow.
And that's a great program.
Sounds like quite a service to the community.
Yeah, I really like that. That's my favorite. Actually, that's my favorite one. I know I'm not supposed to have favorites, but oops, wait a minute. Okay. Anyway, but yeah, we believe in long-term treatment. You know, there's kind of a proliferation of shorter-term programs coming out now, and you just need time to heal with this. And so, long-term treatment, we are abstinence-based, and we believe in what's called the therapeutic community model, where men and women, of course, again, gender separate, gender specific, can come together and support one another in this healing journey, because one of the things that addiction does is it isolates the person. And so coming back into community then helps accelerate the healing for the person.
You've been in this a long time, right?
Yeah, a little over 25 years.
Oh, wow. So you know a little bit about addiction?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad you're here.
So, thanks.
Well, then the question out there might be, what does addiction have to do with mediation? So we're going to talk about addiction and mediation, and we're going to pull that together for you, and Jim is going to help us to explain that. So
it seems like a good place to start if we ask some questions generally about addiction, because I know I had some misperceptions about addiction and its impact on the person. Could you say a little bit more about what that impact does, and specifically on our mental capacities, our brain?
Sure. One of the first things to understand is that addiction, even use of drugs and alcohol, have a really radical effect on the brain. There's been an awful lot of research done lately, done by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, and a lot of independent research that have really shown some pretty dramatic things about what is being done to the brain when drugs and alcohol are introduced to it. Now let me just also say that these same processes that I'm going to describe also can take place for someone who is gambling in an addictive manner.
So it doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol?
It doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol. It can also be things like gambling, sexual addiction. There's a lot of other things that will do very similar things to the brain. Basically what's happening in the brain is, let's just take, if cocaine is introduced into my body, what will happen in the limbic system in the brain, which if you take a finger and put it here and you take a finger and put it here, where those lines intersect is the limbic system.
Inside, of course.
Inside, yeah, yeah, right, inside my brain, right,
Right.
not, yeah. And the limbic system has to do with survival circuitry. And so that's where the brain tells us that we need to eat, that we do need to have sex, because that ensures the survival of our species.
Okay.
Eating ensures our survival. And we need to, just do basic things like defend ourselves as well. And so it's that part of the brain that is concerned with survival, that is concerned with those kind of basic instincts, so to speak. Well, what happens when we introduce, let's say cocaine, into the brain, in the limbic system, where the nerves come together? The nerves come together in what is called the synapse.
Okay.
And our nerves aren't completely connected throughout the whole brain. They stop and start, and in the middle between there's what's called the synaptic gap.
All right.
Now, in normal functioning, when a signal, you have a thought or you want to do something, a signal comes down one neuron and comes to the end of it, it activates what are called neurotransmitters. Now, the main one we're going to be talking about is dopamine.
Okay.
Dopamine is the primary neurotransmitter involved in addiction. And so it activates the neurotransmitter dopamine. The dopamine then jumps across the synaptic gap and activates this nerve, and the signal travels on.
Okay, that's normal.
That's normal. So what happens, though, is that this neuron doesn't need all the dopamine that's sent across in order to activate the signal.
Okay.
And so in a process, what is called reuptake, the dopamine goes across, then some of it stays, but then some of it comes back. It's called reuptake. And this process is going on, almost at the speed of light, and millions of times a minute in our brain. And so goes across, activates, and then some of it comes back in reuptake. If I introduce cocaine into the brain,
All right.
it sets up a barrier in the synaptic gap, and the dopamine goes across, but it can't come back. And so this neuron gets flooded with dopamine. And you know how you feel when your brain gets flooded with dopamine?
I do not.
You feel great.
Oh, then yes, I do.
You feel fantastic. You feel like you have never felt in your entire life.
Oh, yeah.
And your brain says, man, this is good stuff. Now, on that level, almost every drug functions in a similar manner in terms of increasing the dopamine. Now, opiates, such as heroin, hydrocodone, oxycodone, they function a little bit differently in that our brain has very natural, what are called opiate receptors. We can make our own opiates.
Really?
Just
And not get arrested for that?
And not get arrested.
Oh, cool.
But just not to the extent that when you introduce an outside opiate in,
Right.
it blocks the opiate receptors, but it results in the same thing, an increase in dopamine in the brain.
So what does that? So I've got more dopamine over here, and I really like it. Why is that a problem?
Okay, now, here's where the problem comes in. It feels really good. There's actually two problems. One is that's going to cause a reduction in dopamine, general dopamine in the brain. And your brain's going to say, what happened to all my dopamine?
Okay.
We need to put
The natural dopamine.
The natural dopamine,
Okay.
right.
Because this can't feel it anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we need to put more of whatever it was you put in there to bump it back up again. And so that becomes problematic right there. But here's the real problem. Okay, now that's happening first in the limbic system, the survival circuitry.
All right.
There's a pathway that goes from the limbic system up to the prefrontal cortex, which is up here.
That's in the front.
Now the prefrontal cortex, that's this part of your brain right up here.
All right.
The prefrontal cortex has to do with rational thinking, with logic, with relationships, and deciding whether things are going to be harmful for us or good for us. So, for example, so that pathway the limbic system, we experience something pleasurable, that sends a shot of dopamine up to the prefrontal cortex, and it's kind of like a message saying, this was really nice. We ought to do this again. That's what the limbic system's saying. The prefrontal cortex can then, excuse me, look at the data and think rationally, and then send a message back down via what's called the GABA, G-A-B-A, pathway, which is another neurotransmitter, back down to the limbic system and say, yeah, this was nice. We should do this again.
So my
That's
survival mechanism
Right.
is telling me that this was good. I
Yeah.
guess good for my survival.
Well, yeah. For
Okay.
example, let me give you an example
All
of
right.
this. One example would be your favorite restaurant.
Okay.
You can tell me exactly how to get there, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good.
I can tell you what's on their menu.
You can tell me what's on their menu, right? And that's because your brain remembers. See, because the GABA pathway goes back down through these little things attached to the limbic system that have to do with memory.
So,
The amygdala, the VTA, and
so I remember the things I like.
Exactly. Now, a mediocre restaurant.
Ah.
Do you remember that? But the one that you enjoyed, you remember where that was.
Yes.
And you can tell me where to go. As a matter of fact, you'd probably like to take me sometime, right? So,
I like the way you worked that in there. Yeah.
anyway, in normal processes, we experience something pleasurable. It sends a message back. The limbic system sends a message up to the prefrontal cortex saying, this is nice, we need to do this again. The prefrontal cortex can then decide whether we do or not, send a message back down saying either yes, we can do this, or no, this restaurant is way too expensive, so I
don't like it anymore.
We're not going to be able to do that again,
Okay.
even though it was very good food. Now, this is all very important if you think about primitive human beings. I need to remember where the food source is.
If I'm going to survive.
If I'm going to survive, if my family's going to survive, I need to remember, these mechanisms and these processes that happen.
The good ones.
The good ones.
Well, even the bad ones, I suppose. Don't go there again, because
Don't do that again.
don't chase dinosaurs.
Right. Og just died when he ate that berry, so
Right.
let's not do
Let's
that.
not do that. Okay.
And so we need to remember these things, and that's the way our brains are set up.
Well, wait.
So hold on a second. We're going into overload here.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Are you?
So-
Well, all right. Well, let me.
No, overload in the sense that let's just take a quick pause,
Okay.
and then we can regroup, and
Okay.
we can go back at this again. I mean, this is intriguing. I'm enjoying this. I'm learning a lot from this, so really appreciate what
Okay.
it is that you have to say. But
So your pleasure synapses are firing. Is that
something's firing. So
Well-
we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
Okay? We'll be right back.
10 years to learn the business. 10 years to make a name. 1 year on your own. It takes time to build a small business, but only 60 days to transform it with email marketing from Constant Contact. Sign up with Constant Contact and get 60 days of free email marketing to generate referrals, connect with clients, and build the business you've always wanted. Constant Contact. Start your 60-day free trial today.
What happens when soldiers come home? Brene Foundation offers hero support to ensure that our heroes abroad can continue to be heroes at home. We link veterans with organizations who are dedicated to guiding the transition from military hero to civilian hero. If you want to find out how you can support our troops at home, please contact the Brene Foundation or visit brene.com.
Okay, we're back, and we're going to continue our discussion with Jim, and you're going to give us some more information about all of these things that are happening in our brain, and this is really, really good stuff, so have at it.
Okay.
Well, I have a question. If I go to the restaurant and I like it, and that's good, and I take cocaine and I like it, that's good. I mean, it's good, right? What's the problem?
What's the problem? Yeah, and that's the question, and a question that many people who are using will ask that same question: why is this a problem?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the question in some ways. All right, all this dopamine buildup in the limbic system, again, remember that we're sending a shot of dopamine up to the prefrontal cortex saying,
In
we
order
need
to survive,
in order
I
to
need to do
survive,
this
we
again.
need to do this again.
All right.
Here's the real problem. And Robert, you said the word pleasure before. This is literally described as the pleasure pathway.
Ooh.
So this pathway that goes front to back, or back to front and then back again, is the pleasure pathway.
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Never knew what it was.
Yeah,
but,
that's
yeah.
it. Here's the real problem. With that increase of dopamine, it doesn't send just the normal amount of dopamine up to the prefrontal cortex. It sends a blast of dopamine up to the prefrontal cortex.
More pleasure.
Yeah, lots more pleasure. But it's like sending a bowling ball through a garden hose.
That's not good.
It literally damages the channel. It physically damages the channel. It is not just a psychological thing. It is a very physical
Physically
damage.
tears it down.
Yes.
Wow.
It carves it out. It widens it.
Huh.
Again, like sending that bowling ball through. And it hits the prefrontal cortex with such force that it's not, we should do this again. We have to do this again.
Yeah.
So, sometimes that can happen immediately. With meth and cocaine, that can happen immediately. But with some of the other drugs that are slower acting in the brain, the change in the brain form and function, and there is literally change in the form of the brain and the function of the brain, that it negates the ability of the prefrontal cortex to think rationally, and we have to do this again. And remember, it's on the level of survival.
Huh. Wow.
And so I have to do this again to survive. And because that GABA pathway goes back down through the memory circuits, I will remember that first high every single time, and I will be chasing that. Addicts talk about chasing the first high. I will remember that over and above everything else, over and above all the negative and adverse consequences that happen to me.
Even though I'm getting pleasure out of the.
Even though I'm getting pleasure.
So,
That's exactly right. It literally physically damages the brain and takes away the ability of the prefrontal cortex to make rational choices and logical choices.
Well, then, how can I, as a parent or a loved one, reach them? I mean, if I can't, you're telling me I can't use reason? I mean, I'm using logic. I'm explaining. Look at the consequences.
Right.
You're going to jail. Your relationships are ruined.
You lost your job. And think about that. Think about that. A reasonable person, if I'm faced with losing my job, well, what's the reasonable thing to do?
Straighten out.
Straighten
Not to
out.
do that anymore.
Not to do that anymore. If I'm looking at, if I know that if I get a DUI, what's the reasonable thing to do? If I get a DUI, I might lose my job or I'll go to jail. What's the reasonable thing to do?
Don't drive in that neighborhood.
Yeah, right. Because the man's out to get me in that neighborhood. Yeah, I know.
That's not the right answer.
Right. No, it's, well, the reasonable thing to do is don't drink and drive.
Oh, yeah.
Do one or the other, but don't do both together. If my wife is about to divorce me because of my drinking, the reasonable thing to do is to stop drinking. But yet we see over and over and over, people don't stop. Well, that's a very curious thing.
And they can't explain it either.
And they can't seem to explain it. And you know what? The smarter the person is, the worse it is.
Really?
Because they think that they can reason their way through this. You see. But since it's on the level of survival, we do tricks on ourselves. We denial, we rationalize. We're in denial. We rationalize, we minimize. We say it's somebody else's fault. Well, if my job wasn't so bad, I wouldn't have to drink so much.
If you weren't nagging me all the time.
If you weren't nagging, if you were married to my wife, yeah, I've been married 35 years, and it's fine.
Yeah. But this works both ways. I mean, you're saying it's not the nagging wife, it's also the.
It's the drinking.
Okay.
It's not. See, addicts, they get confused and they reverse cause and effect. Instead of, they will say, well, it's my spouse that's making me drink because she's always nagging me. But what they won't admit to, or what perhaps they can't even understand, is that my drinking is causing such problems that my wife is trying to get me to stop. That comes across as nagging, but it's my wife that's making me drink, not my drinking causing the problem. So they will reverse cause and effect.
Okay, I have a question for you. Because what I'm hearing in your example is that it's the man that's doing the drinking.
I said spouse, but go ahead.
Yeah, you did that one time, but though, so this works both ways. So it can be the wife or the
Absolutely.
woman who's addicted.
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely, and
All
we
right. So
see
it's
that
not a
more
one-
and more. No, not at all. As a matter of fact, actually that's kind of an old paradigm of, and we do see more male addicts than we do female addicts, but in today's society that really isn't. I mean, it's that classic example of the man and the woman. The man's drinking and the woman. That doesn't hold as true anymore. It is just as easily the other way around anymore. And so you're right. You're absolutely right. So a reasonable person, a person who is able to apply reason to a situation, might do something radically different than an addict does. Now, so we see just from their behavior that they don't function the same, they're not thinking the same way.
Right.
And again, they'll reverse cause and effect. That's one of the ways to recognize addiction in a person, is that they will reverse cause and effect. So the ability to reason has been compromised by this real physical damage that happens in the brain, taking out the ability of the prefrontal cortex to reason.
Well,
and so everything, because once we're on the level of survival, we will do everything to protect what we think it is that we need to survive.
which is the drug.
Which
We're going
for
to do
them-
anything we need to do.
Right, which for them then becomes the drug.
Well, if what can I do? I mean, my best weapon is my
Nagging.
logic and my reason.
Right, nagging.
Yeah, right. To get them to see.
Right.
But you're telling me that I can't get them to see. So what
Your
can I
best
do?
logic means nothing to them. That's the hardest thing. We do a family workshop for families in the community, and I explain all these things, about the brain and everything, and I tell them the same thing. Your best logic means nothing. Now, this is a workshop for families whose loved one is still out there using. And inevitably, there is a dad in there, and this time I will go with the male stereotype, because there is inevitably a dad out there that will say something to the effect of, now wait a minute, if they would just go get a job, or I've explained to them the dangers of this,
Right.
and I'll have to say, and I apologize, actually, I say I'm so sorry, your best logic means nothing to them.
Well, Robert, I could see that this would create a lot of conflict. I mean, if I'm trying to get this person's ruining their life and maybe ruining my life, and I'm trying desperately, but
And you're saying, you're ruining my life,
yes,
and the person just doesn't seem to get it. See,
Or they might fake getting it.
Or they might fake, they might be compliant,
Yeah.
But you see, the fundamental difference is that, let's say you're the spouse and you say, this is a problem.
yeah,
Well, you're right, and you know you're right, but from the addict's perspective, this isn't a problem. This is the answer. See, an alcoholic doesn't drink because they have a problem with alcohol. An alcoholic drinks because they think alcohol is the answer to their
the problem.
problems.
wow.
And so you're saying, this is a problem, and they're thinking, you have no idea what you're talking about. This is the answer.
This is a huge conflict.
Well, that's how we got into this discussion around, the addiction and mediation. So yeah, it's a problem.
So,
No.
does this happen a lot? I mean, are there
Yes.
any statistics about if our audience might be having this problem, how big is it? I mean, is there a percentage of the population?
Yeah, and there's, it's really funny. There's always NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, they'll put out statistics, and the government will put out statistics. there's really a wide range.
Okay.
I mean, it's really hard to just say it's this percentage or that percentage, because it's fluctuating and it's changing
All the time?
all the time. I bet you'll see more of this in Colorado.
Real? Oh, I see, yes.
They legalized marijuana.
Right.
Marijuana has a radical effect on the brain, not just the prefrontal cortex, the entire cortex. And this is why we're seeing much stronger drugs. We're seeing this opiate epidemic that we're having. You know, you've heard about the opiate epidemic. This is the largest heroin epidemic our nation has ever seen.
Wow.
And it is a very dangerous heroin that's out there right now, and it hasn't slowed down. We've seen cycles of dangerous heroin go through before. This one has not slowed down because what they're cutting the heroin with is so powerful that people are willing to risk their lives to use it.
To get that high.
To get that high again. And so I think that any statistic that we look at, and one of the reasons I don't give a statistic, by the way, let's say I say a certain percentage of the population has this issue.
Right.
Well, then if a person's out there listening, an addict or even a spouse who enables, they'll say, well, I'm not in that percentage.
I see.
That's those people
See,
over there.
Not me.
So 1 out of 3 people are facing this problem, right?
Yeah, I think
So
so.
that means that one of us in here are facing that problem now. So,
You said it, not me. You know, well, but honestly, there is, I don't think there's a family in the United States that doesn't have an addict within the family, or that their family is not affected in some way by addiction.
Wow.
yeah,
And so that's a problem.
That is.
yeah.
I believe addiction is the main problem in our society.
I don't see a way out of this. I mean, if I can't get this person to change, let me ask it this way. If this is happening to anybody in our audience,
Right.
what should they not do?
Sure.
What should they stop doing
Sure.
that would help?
Hold that thought for a
Okay,
second,
sure.
because we have to take another break.
Okay, sure.
We have
sure.
to acknowledge the folks who are making it possible for us.
Absolutely.
here.
We want to
So
do
we're
that.
going to take a quick break, but we'll be back. It'll give Jim a chance to get his thoughts together on that question, and then we'll right back at you.
Does your son need a more challenging, focused, and encouraging educational environment? Renaissance Christian Academy is an affordable private school for boys located in McDonough, Georgia, with certified teachers that are uniquely equipped to help your son master learning. You're welcome to schedule a tour of our facilities by calling 770-305-9881 or by visiting our website at rcaboysacademy.org. Renaissance Christian Academy, developing young men to be great leaders through Christ-centered learning.
Welcome back, everyone. We have Jim Seckman talking about addiction, and I have one last question.
Right.
I'm the loved one. This is tearing me apart. It's tearing everything I value apart. And I just want to keep trying harder and harder and harder. What advice can you give me? Is there something I should stop doing?
Sure.
What is it?
Sure. Well, the first thing is, the loved one still believes that their loved one can still think reasonably.
Right. I think they can, yeah.
Yeah. And you want them back.
Yes.
I get that. I totally get that. But the first thing you need to do is stop thinking that they can think reasonably, because they can't. It just can't be done. And the second thing is stop enabling them. Stop making it easy for them to use. Don't call up the boss and say, oh yeah, he's got a headache, so he can't come in today. Let the consequences of the addiction take place. Now that is really scary. I get that. Because what are we afraid of?
It's all falling apart.
Well, we're afraid they're going to die.
Yeah.
That's what we're afraid of.
Yes.
And I get that. As a father myself, I get that. I understand. I'm scared that my child, my loved one, is going to die. I don't want that to happen. And so I'm trying to do everything in my power to get them to stop.
Wow.
But that's where I just don't have that kind of power. And so I think the best thing really is to get some professional help. talk to a counselor, talk to an addiction professional, talk to a treatment facility, get some help. We have a full family program at MARR, and we do this kind of thing all the time. But you need to start setting boundaries, because the addict is going to take advantage of those people around them. And if I set boundaries against my addicted loved one, not against, that's not really the right phrase, is it? I'm setting boundaries, that they can't talk to me that way. They're not going to do this or that, again, if I start setting boundaries, that's going to force them to look more at themselves and experience, once again, the consequences. Addicts only learn through consequences. But the best thing is to just know we can't do this alone. So if my spouse is drinking, there's what's called Al-Anon meetings that I can go to and get help from other people whose spouses are drinking.
And they can get this information from you or your organization?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But the Al-Anon is a non-addicted person.
Al-Anon is the non-addicted person who goes for support, yes. And ideally, it's while the addicted person is going to, like, an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, I might go to the Al-Anon meeting that's along with that, because once that gets into the family system, the whole family system gets sick.
Gets affected.
Oh yeah, and radically.
So the addiction spreads into the family, affecting everyone on some level.
It affects everything. It affects everybody and everything around it, and it takes away what it means to be a human being by what it does to the person. And so the family system that's caught up with that, they are focusing their entire attention on the addict. They need to stop doing that. They need to live their lives. They need to do what they need to do for them. And that requires setting boundaries. That requires getting outside help, because it's very difficult for someone who's caught up in all of that to break out of it on their own. It's extremely difficult.
Now, I might have missed something. It might be just the way I'm hearing what you're saying, but I hear you refer to the addict. That's the person.
That would be the person who is using.
Right.
Yes.
And then you've used the phrase the addiction. Is there a difference?
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's a good question, because you have to bear with me on my anthropomorphism. Because when we think about addiction, it almost seems like a deliberate force that is set about to destroy our lives. And so I do slip into that, and most addiction counselors do too. We talk about the addiction. We talk about, and it is really a disease because of the changes in form and function of the brain. It really is a disease. And but we'll talk about it sometimes as if it were this creature that was going to devour you, because for all intents and purposes, that's what it is. Yeah. I mean, really, that's what it does. So we do talk. Yeah, I do slip in and out of that. You're right.
Okay.
Good catch.
Just wanted to get a
it's
little.
You mediators, that's what it is. You guys actually listen.
Occasionally. So, yeah, we do. We try to take it in so that we can kind of help folks out, which is what what you're doing also there. So that was the question that you needed answered for this time.
Thank
you. Yeah, we need to take another break here.
Kenny, tell us your contacting information.
Yeah. Sure,
and then we'll run off.
MARR online is MARR Inc, MARRINC.org. We are a nonprofit, so MARRInc.org. That'll put you to our website, which has phone numbers for families, has phone numbers for admissions, and it has a general line that you could call, and that's really the best way is through the website, and it's you can access that on a mobile device or on your computer as well.
Well, there's so much more to tie in. Can we continue this conversation later? More?
You betcha.
You'll stick around? Okay.
So we're going to continue this. We're going to take a break for now, and we'll come back with more.
Yes.
The next conversation will be around the addiction and a little bit more about mediation.
Okay, sure.
So how that plays into it.
Very good.